Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 34 of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. I hope that you are having a great end to your 2023 or start to your 2024, whenever you are watching or listening to this episode. Today, we are going to talk about, I'm going to talk about my top 5 tips for your first prep. This is something that I've realized I could probably do an unnecessary amount of tips or bits of advice or things that I could discuss through in this episode. So it's why I've kind of nailed this down to 5 tips exclusively. And then maybe what I'll do, if people are interested, is do like a part 2 at some point where I can maybe go through a few additional things, because there's a lot of stuff, I suppose, that I'll go through today that are kind of like, I'll say the more like serious stuff, where I'm kind of giving more advice, like management of the prep and how to approach things, etc., as opposed to just like simple kind of like, I suppose, like prep tips for, like show day and things like that as well. So I'll probably do another part at some other point, but we're going to go through 5 of the main tips in this video. I obviously want to say before I start is thank you so much for all of the amazing support over 2023. I probably said this in my last episode, I can't remember. But even still, regardless, huge thank you for everything. This podcast has been more than what I could have ever asked for in terms of the reach that I've been able to have and the impact that it's been able to have. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for supporting. It means the world. I want to make things bigger and better in this next year. So any requests, always let me know. Any feedback, anything you like, anything you don't like, let me know. So I'm always open to criticism and advice. And ultimately, this is not a podcast for me. It's for you as the listeners to provide for you. So, whatever you need, you let me know and I will do my best to deliver. So yeah, thank you for that. Anyone who is new here, hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you aren't already, please subscribe, please follow, like, share, all that amazing stuff. Because if it can help to reach more people, and also just to provide me, the support and the assurance that you like the podcast, it really does mean so much. So thank you very much. But without ado, we'll get into the episode today, and we'll start with the first tip. And something that I say this all the time, and I actually said this on my story the other day, is that when I give a lot of different things of advice or when I talk about different scenarios, of course, a lot of the things I talk through are things that I have learned and are there to maybe help my clients and that I've learned through coaching, but are also things that, just like things I've learned through coaching, are things that I've learned myself. And it's a huge part of, why I do what I do is not just for me, but it's also to develop my knowledge and to share that with other people. So when I talk through different tips or I talk through things of advice, they're often things that I've learned from, that I've done wrong or I've experienced. And as a result, I want to get those things out there. So especially with what I'll go through today, these are things that I absolutely wish that I had listened to before my first prep. And I can also probably guarantee that even if I saw this episode, I probably would have thought twice about listening to it. So I'd probably think, I've got it all figured out. I'll be fine. I did not. I probably should have reached out to find more advice, but at the same time, I probably didn't know where to look. So if you are endeavoring in your first prep next year, or if you're coaching first timers or whatever it may be, these are obviously just good things to remind yourself of and things that I've experienced myself and I want to run through. So as I was saying before I went off on a tangent, the number 1 tip, and this is genuinely my number 1 tip, and this is to not neglect the importance of your routine. Now, anyone who's been watching or listening to my podcast, you'll have heard me speak through so many different topics and through different episodes, about the importance of like spending time in an off season or spending time bodybuilding before you prep. And one of the main reasons for that is so that you kind of already have that bodybuilding routine in stone. But even still, there's a difference between a prep routine and an off-season routine. Like even a good off-season routine isn't quite good enough for a prep, in the sense that when you enter prep, you will have more to do. Not necessarily off the bat, but over time that will continue to evolve, like it will evolve, and your energy availability also evolves. So as a result, you have to stay on top of your routine. Your routine is extremely important for you to complete your daily tasks. So to complete the things that you need, such as training, eating, expenditure, sleep, work, to complete those things, have enough time to do them, because especially as cardio probably increases, expenditure increases, you're going to have more to do, but you also need to be able to do those things extremely effectively. So it's not just about getting them done when they need to get done. It's about finding what time of the day you can do those things as best as possible, so that you can do them without them accumulating a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of fatigue. Like, for example, there's a huge difference between getting your steps in at random points across the day, rushing them in at the end of night, that affecting sleep, rushing them in before training, that affecting training, or having set walk times across the day that are specifically managed so that they don't affect training, so that they don't affect sleep, so that you can keep your training performance as best as possible, keep your stress low, and keep your look as good as possible as well. If you have a solid routine, if you set up times in your day, you keep that consistent, prep is genuinely so much easier. You can make prep, just like with bodybuilding in general, you can make it as easy as you like or as difficult as you like. And everyone's going to have a very different set of circumstances. So not everyone is going to be able to do things at the same time every day. Most people won't. Even if you work for yourself, you're still probably going to have some influences that mean that every day isn't the exact same. You can't always have complete control over what the day looks like. So you will probably have some days that are quite different. So you're not always going to be able to do like training at the same time, cardio at the same time. It might have to change, but at least having some plan, or at least having a routine on the different days, is really important. So even if your days change, if sometimes it means you are going to have to train differently, don't just freeball it. Don't just go in and be like, oh, okay, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. It's going to be a stressful day. Like, no, plan a routine for those days. Have a plan for what you're going to do, because if you develop that routine, it will be much easier. Like I said, you can plan these things out to make them so much less stressful. And that's often the hardest thing with prep, is that, everyone says like it's energy draining and it's difficult, and yeah, it is at points, but as long as you are organized and your routine around it, you can make those things just so much easier for yourself. And then all you have to do is execute, rather than having to think about doing something whilst also worrying about a million other different things at once. Because as energy does get lower, tasks get harder. Your ability to maybe handle stress is also like diminished slightly. So as a result, the easier and the less like stress involving you can create those tasks, the better. That's the most important thing that I wish I had implemented sooner. I only implemented this, honestly, like, I'm not going to beat around the bush, probably the last 8 weeks of my prep, I started to actually like prioritize like my routine better on a daily basis, like optimizing my sleep times, having a better routine with like the way I set up like my morning routine and my cardio routine, and when I do my steps, so that they were all done and I wasn't spending every day checking my watch and going, oh, how many steps am I on now? Going to have to go out again. I had a routine and everything was done. All I had to do was execute. I knew what time I needed to train, knew what time I needed to work, etc., etc. So you can definitely make that a lot easier. And I wish, like, I look back now and I'm like, wow, I could have made that so much easier for myself. Like a first prep especially is like a big challenge, but you can make that challenge enjoyable. I think that's the most important thing. So that's my number one thing, is do not neglect the importance of your routine. Do not neglect, adapting that and keeping on top of it as your demands get higher, and as your energy also becomes, more and more precious, and your tasks need to be given way more attention and energy than they may be used to previously. When you are in off season, you can deal with having a bit of a poorer night's sleep and staying up too late or being distracted, and it might not be the end of the world. If that happens in prep and you're in a day when you're very tired, you're probably not going to feel your best in that session. And how do you think you're going to feel after that and during that? Not great. So you do have to be more protective of those things, and you can, benefit yourself there by, like I say, just staying on top of that routine a bit more. So that's the first thing. Second tip from me is going to be to simplify the process. So I suppose this kind of actually follows on like quite nicely from routine, because as much as I kind of ramble on a little bit, as I'm sure you'll know by now, the main thing there is actually simplifying the routine more to make it easier. And you can do this as well with bodybuilding. You know, with bodybuilding, with the prep, it's very easy to overcomplicate, you know, like start to overanalyze the process, think that it's more intense, there's more to it than actually there really is. And especially if you get very much in your own head in a prep, you can get into a very like over analytical mindset. And it's more important that you have the awareness of this now rather than like falling into the trap of that, falling into the habit of it, and then not really understanding what's going on or how to kind of pull yourself away from it. But no, like there will be points where you are getting in prep and you're probably taking physique shots every day, you know, every day, especially at the latter end, I'm sure. I mean, that's what I do with my clients, and most coaches will do that, is, you know, when you're getting to those latter stages, physique shots will be pretty much every day, check-ins every day. But for the majority of the prep, you'll be even doing that more frequently, you know, 2-3 times a week, as opposed to maybe your usual once a week or whatever it is there. And it's very easy then for at that point for you as the athlete, even though it's not your job, to start over analyzing what's going on, you know, judging your physique too much, worrying, becoming, you know, anxious about the look in the morning or anxious about your scale weight, like all of these things. And it's going to be pretty much, honestly, near impossible for you to be able to get a fair judgment at that point. Genuinely. And it's exactly why you have a coach. It's why you have a coach to assess like what's going on. It's not your job to do those things. But even regardless of like the latter stages of prep, when you maybe got a bit of prep brain, you know, like you can think this way about the whole prep in general, and, you know, get to a point where you're kind of over analyzing what's going on even before the prep's happening. Where you're thinking like, oh, I've got this big prep, and, you know, I don't know like how it's going to go, and I'm worried, am I going to be able to do it, or whatever it may be. And this is where you can really simplify this, especially if, as I kind of preface at the start, you know, you've already been spending time bodybuilding for a good period of time. You've probably been through diet phases before or off season. Let's simplify what you're actually doing in a prep. In a prep, you are experiencing fat loss, probably just as you ever done before, you know, experiencing a rate of loss. And the only thing that's different is you're just going to be pushing for more. You're going to be pushing for more that you have done before. Yes, certain things are managed differently. That's your coach's job really to do that. But other than that, not much changes. You know, you're still training as you've always trained, training as best as you can. You're still hitting your nutrition goals. You're still doing your expenditure. Yes, maybe more of it, but you're still doing all the things that you've been doing in the past or you have done before. You're just pushing it to a next level. And I think that when you then simplify, it's like, oh, okay, we're just pushing for a rate of loss. All I've got to do is keep stress low. Okay, that's actually a lot simpler than you think. And it's really helped me, especially like spending more time, obviously, from the coach's perspective, because I now, as an athlete as well, I have virtually no stress with my own process, because, you know, you spend so long coaching others through their process or understanding it more and more the more that you're educated or experienced. And you're like I would never get stressed about an athlete's process ever, because I know how well I can manage it. And I know that it's just a case of making decisions, making the necessary changes. But for some reason, when you are in the athlete position, you can get very much like in this like over analytical mindset that something drastic is happening or something seriously wrong or whatever it may be. And that's often not the case. And actually taking time to like simplify it and be like, okay, this is just another diet phase, a bigger, more challenging diet phase, but don't overcomplicate it into something that it isn't, because it is probably a lot simpler than you think. Prep in general, in a sense, is kind of simpler than you might think. Still hard, but it's simpler than you probably anticipate. And kind of reminding yourself of that and keeping stress low, as I said, is so important. Like the more that you can keep stress low, the better. And often the only time where things are wrong is when stress is high. So like if you are starting to like worry, and this is kind of like, it's so funny, I'm going on a bit of a tangent now, but if you think about, when people are dieting or when people are in prep and they're like, the scale weight's not moving, there's very few circumstances where there's actually something wrong. So like, for example, there could be an issue with someone's like thyroid production. There could be like an adrenal gland issue. There could be other things going on. It's very rare that that's the case. And that's usually something you'd be able to assess through previous diets. But often it's just because that person is stressing. So it's like somebody can stress about the scale weight. Because they're stressed about the scale weight's not going down. And it's like the same thing vice versa. It's like they're wanting to see the scale weight go down, but the reason why they're not is because they're stressed about the scale weight not going down. So then the scale weight doesn't go down. So it's like you can create these like negative cycles in your head, and it's so important that you can kind of pull yourself away from those. So in those moments where you feel like you are overanalyzing things, and I'm sure like this is what your kind of coach will be there to do across this process, is like keep your head screwed on in the moments where you need it. It's like reminding you of those things and helping you to keep your stress low and reducing your need to overanalyze kind of what's going on and seeing the bigger picture, simplifying things. So don't be afraid to simplify that process. Okay, now moving on to point 3. This is, all of these points are very important, but this is one that you have to continually remind yourself of, and you need to start thinking about now if you haven't already. And that is managing your expectations, having a continual awareness for your expectations, and always bringing yourself back to these in moments where necessary. So this is where I always suggest to lay these out with intention at the start of your prep in order of priority. So you'll probably have several expectations for yourself across the prep. It might not just be one, it might be two, it might be different things. This is not necessarily related to placings. Honestly, I would say not related to placings. I'm going to come on to that in a second. But have a priority of what you would like to see across the prep, during the prep, at the end of the prep. And have that like sorted at the start of the prep, and you've got a clear headspace. You know what you want from your first season of competing. And you can refer back to that throughout the prep when you need to, when you feel like you're maybe getting a bit lost, because you will probably get a bit lost with like what you want to achieve. And you'll have moments where probably across the prep, you might critique yourself more than is necessary. And you'll probably forget what you're trying to achieve along the way. And that's why coming back to those expectations is really important. So I'll run through on my perspective what I think that the most important priority should be for your expectation in your first prep. And that should be to complete a challenge that you have never achieved before. That is the first thing that you're doing. The first thing that you're doing is doing something, pushing yourself to do something, to see what you can do with something that you've never done before in your life. That is the number one goal of your first prep. That's all. That is all. That should be like number one at the list. Complete it. Second thing is then to also complete that whilst enjoying that as much as possible. Great. Amazing. And then also then as a result of doing both of those things, completing it and enjoying it, is, okay, cool. Now you've set a point. You've had this like baseline point of where you now want to go in bodybuilding. That is what that is. Okay. So after you've then done that prep, you can, based on how well you completed it, how much you enjoyed it, you can then go, okay, cool. This is where we're at. Now I can set goals. Now you can like set real competitive goals aside from getting on stage, to be like, okay, cool. Like I really enjoyed this. I want to, push myself to the top level that I can do. Or, I really like this category. I'd like to go there. Or I'd like to, go back to that show that I just did, and I'd like to place because I came, just outside of the placings, or whatever it be. Then you can start to build, because you know where you're at. Before you've ever competed, you have no idea. You have no idea where you're going to be. Like you can have an idea, but you don't really know if like you're going to win at a show, you're going to be down here, or what you look like next to the level of competition. Because again, competition changes at every show. So having a goal when it comes to placings is near to impossible. Genuinely, it's hard for you to put that into place because you'll see a lot of experienced competitors having some goals for their placings, and that's probably because they've maybe been very close to that level of placing before, and now that's kind of the next level up for them, or whatever it may be. But from a first-timer perspective, I think it's really important to have expectations that are outside of a placing kind of like narrative, especially when you're going into the prep. Things can evolve as the prep goes on, but you probably will from the outset. It's really important for those first priorities to be kind of outside of the placing realm. And like I said, even there, aside from even just, goal setting, it's to even just ensure you enjoy the process. Like, you need to have enjoyment for that, ensure that you actually like it, because bodybuilding is a choice. No one's forcing you to do it. So actually just using the prep as like a test to be like, okay, I really enjoy this. I've enjoyed the process, because there's more to bodybuilding than just a placing. The time that you're on stage is so minute. It's so minute in bodybuilding. You spend, I don't even want to even imagine the percentage of the time that people spend on stage comparative to not on stage. So you need to enjoy the stuff that is not being on stage so much in order for you to keep doing this for long periods of time. So that's kind of what you need to be able to gain as you kind of come out of the prep. But the reason why I kind of say, I know you're probably thinking, Loz, you're really saying like, don't set any kind of placing goals. And no, I'm not. Like I said, I'm not, and that might evolve across the prep, and you can absolutely set goals, like whether it's, I'd like to, get a qualification for a finals, or I'd like to, see if I can get close to the placings, or whatever it may be, or I'd like to be competitive. You can set those goals, absolutely, but they shouldn't be your number one priority goals in your first season. That's the way that I like to think about things. I think you should always be just aiming to see where you're at, because bodybuilding is a journey. It is a journey. It's not about being there in your first season. And sometimes if you do get there in your first season, it can be really hard to then know where you belong and where you go after that. So having that journey is something to be extremely grateful for. And it's important to remember that, like if you go to a show, there's 10 divisions. One person obviously wins in that division. Like, you're looking at what? Say there's 1,000 people in the show. My maths is really going to show through really badly here. I don't know why I've decided to do a math summary. I was going to say 10% win, but that's not going to be correct, is it? Because that would be wrong. A very small amount of people will win that, win in the show. And most people, above 90% of people, let's just say, it's definitely above 90% of people do not win in the show. And that's not even including first times. There's probably going to be a lot of people who are very experienced. So I made a mistake there trying to do a math equation, but most people will not win their first show. Most people will not win the show in general. There's one person who wins, so that's not, like I say, it's not a reason why you can't shoot high eventually, but remember the goal of your first season and what it's there for, and having those expectations laid out. If you get good placings in your first season, that's a cherry on top of the cake. That is just like the next like level of something that's great that you can take away, but it's not like everything, if that makes sense. And that's something that in my prep, I changed drastically. Like my first half of the prep, I had my expectations of myself all messed up. I was all over the shop. I actually don't think I knew what was going on in my head. I hadn't really broken down like long-term versus short-term goals. So as a result, I was very like pressurized on myself. But then when I got to about, like I said earlier, with like even my routine, I got to like 6 weeks out and I really shifted it around. And I was like, you know what? I just want to like see what it's like and see if I enjoy it. And I did. Like that was what I did. And I had the best time. And that changed my perspective on bodybuilding massively and has helped me to be more driven in my overall process as a result of it and just have a better experience. So that's point 3. We've so far been through point 1, which was routine, point 2, which was simplifying the process, and point 3, which was managing your expectation. Point 4, tip number 4 is be mindful of where you draw negative focus or negative energy. there's a few things that result in you basically draining your energy towards negative things or drawing your focus towards negative things. And I'll obviously run through them now. Prep is a very hard challenge, as I've already said. It is. But prep is, like I say, it's not necessarily for everyone. You don't have to do it. It's an incredible challenge to go to. So if you're in a position now where, you're doing this to see how it is, that's also not a bad thing, because you're aware that it's a challenge and you're wanting to challenge yourself. I think the only reason why I say that is because there's a lot of people who will feel as though they're being forced to do it because somebody says, oh, just because you train, you have to compete, which you don't. But if you want to compete and you're doing this to also just see if you like it, because not everyone goes into competing and knows they want to do that for the long term. I think nobody really does. But some people will be like, I have this long-term goal of doing XYZ. Some people are like, okay, I just want to give it a go and see how it is. Each are also okay. But just knowing that prep is challenging is important. But having that gratitude that it's a choice is something that you have to remember throughout the process continually. Because it's very easy during prep to fall into kind of like a complaining headspace as such, to start to complain about the things that you quote unquote have to do on a daily basis, or the things that, like suck about prep or whatever it be. So like examples are like, oh, I'm so tired and I have to do steps, and I have to take my check-ins and I have to do my cardio and this and that. And don't forget, like, you are choosing to do this. Yes, you have to do them in pursuit of a goal, but a goal that you are choosing to do. And it can be very easy to create your own like echo chamber in your own head, or to also create like a bit of an echo chamber on social media, like whether you already follow people who have, expressed those kind of thoughts on social media, or you fall into the habit of following those people and doing it yourself. So often if you, share those thoughts out yourself, you're going to get a lot back. And that's not me saying that you can't have a bad day. It's not me saying that you can't be honest with the way that you feel, but actually like taking a moment to ask yourself what you're getting through complaining in those situations is kind of important. So this is like the negative energy draw, like the negative focus. You're creating a negative perspective on the prep. So if you spend all day kind of complaining or moaning, is that helping you? Like just ask yourself, like, is that helping you? Is it driving a better experience of the things that you need to do in the day? Or is it driving a worse experience? That's what you've got to ask. Like, it's okay to feel shit on some days, because you're going to probably have some days where you will feel tired, where you will feel like you do not want to pick up that bar in RDL. You do not want to get on that Stairmaster, or you don't want to go out for another walk, whatever it is. And you can say to yourself, oh God, I don't want to do it with this. Like, I'm really tired. But then you take a moment and you go, you know what? I am tired, but I'm choosing to do this for a goal. Like, I'm not going to dwell on that negative feeling. I know that for me to get the best experience and the best outcomes, I will feel better through keeping the positive focus, through keeping a more positive outlook and putting my best efforts into this. So it's just like anything, it's normal to have negative thoughts. It's normal to have not the most positive mindset all the time, and you don't have to fake it. Like, I'm not saying fake it and be like positive in a toxic way, but when you do have those negative thoughts, take a moment to actually like think about them, think about what you want to sit on, think about the way that you want to phrase things, understand why you're doing those things, and bring it back into a positive way. So that's like one of the most important things with like being mindful of that negative focus and where you draw it, is just thinking about it a little bit careful when you fall into some of those habits a little bit. Because bodybuilding is such a huge privilege. Genuinely, like, can you like imagine like the ability that we have to restrict, I say restrict food, but we're restricting our energy that we intake in order to pursue fat loss. We're doing that by choice. Like, that's a choice that we're doing that. Like, we're not in a position where we're being forced into energy restriction. We're not in a position where we're being forced into energy expenditure. Like, these are all things that we get to choose to do. We get to push ourselves to do a goal that is ultimately like again, a huge privilege, like to have a goal for ourselves that we're working towards for self-development. Like these are all great things that I do think is really important to pull ourselves into. Agree with it or disagree, I'm a huge advocate for that. And I think it's really important that we continually do remind ourselves of that across the prep as well. So just to run through some more examples of this as well. I think, as I've already kind of touched upon, content consumption is a big thing with this as well. I think that food focus is another example of being mindful of your like negative focus here. So again, like we're choosing to like restrict our energy balance. We need to make sure that, you know, like we are going to be hungry. We need to manage our appetite. Managing your food focus, in my opinion, is something that I feel to be very important. I think there's nothing wrong with enjoying food, but I think appreciating that when you are in a prep, you have to understand what is going to be good for you in your goal and what's maybe not going to be so great for you in your goal, in the sense of making the experience enjoyable, making your adherence enjoyable, and making the post-show phase afterwards also enjoyable so that you can manage your reverse and manage your recovery phase. So like as an example, if you spend a lot of time across your prep consuming content that's driving up food focus, like staring at reels or TikToks of food or whatever it may be, is this helping you to manage your hunger better or manage it worse? When you're hungry, if you're looking at other foods that you cannot have, do you feel better about the meal that you're going to have? Do you feel better about your food focus? Do you feel as though it will help you to manage your ultimately like abnormal, like hunger towards the end of the prep? Is that going to make that better? Is that going to make it worse? Like ask yourself those questions. And then you can make the choice as to whether you think that's going to help you. The answer is often no, it's not going to help you. But that gives you then the opportunity to, you know, you do what you like with it. But from my opinion, I always think you should ask yourself that. And then you can realize like, okay, this is probably something that is going to make it very difficult for me to manage my hunger after prep. It's making it very difficult for me to get through my days of eating without constantly thinking about food, being able to manage my hunger or whatever it may be. Like rather than actually coming away from that, being in a bit more of like a focused state on what you need to do, enjoying it. It's kind of like, I mean, it's like with anything, isn't it? It's like if there's something that you're choosing to not have and then you're just almost like tempting yourself with it, like teasing yourself with it all the time, like is that making that easier or like more challenging for yourself? Like that's just something there. So these are all things that, you know, are managing negative focus for yourself, for your own experience. But this is not just for you. This is not just about managing this for you. It's for managing it around the people around you. Because what effect does this have on those around you? And what does this affect on their perspective on bodybuilding? You know, so if you are constantly in a complaining mindset about the things that you have to do, if you are constantly like hungry and like talking about foods that you want to eat that aren't things that you want, if you're constantly talking about how much you don't want to do your cardio, like all these things, the people around you who love and care for you are going to think, oh my God, like why is this person doing something that they clearly don't enjoy and they don't want to do? And that's not to say that, you know, sometimes you'll have goals that will push you to do things that you don't necessarily want. Part of that is discipline. But remember again, like you're doing this because you want to do it and you actually enjoy bodybuilding. Because if you constantly like kind of complain about a lot of things around your family, whether it's subconscious or not, or around friends, like they will literally probably not like bodybuilding very much because they will think it's not making you a very good person or not making you a very happy person, you know? So if you are like very, very miserable, like on prep or not enjoying it, or you complain about things like subconsciously, they might think like, oh, okay, like they don't enjoy this, and they're likely to become less supportive of what you're doing. So even in those moments where maybe you're speaking to a friend, you're like, oh God, I don't really want to do my cardio today. And they'll be like, come on, like, do you not want to do it? And you go, you know what? Like, yeah, I do want to do it. I need to do it. I'm just tired, but I'll get it done, whatever it is, you know? And I think rephrasing those things, especially around the people around you and educating them and trying to be mindful of the way that you manage your headspace is really important. So when you're managing your like negative focus, your negative attention, it's just about managing your headspace, managing the way you think about things, and especially maybe managing like content consumption can be extremely helpful. And this is all to improve your experience of bodybuilding, improve your ease of doing bodybuilding, doing your prep, and also the perception of that like for yourself and also for people around you as well. It's just good to kind of keep yourself in check with those things. So that leads me on to my fifth point, which is kind of like a nice point to end on, and it flows on quite well from the last point, and that's just, you know, finding variables that you enjoy every day. So I know I've probably, from my perspective, not sold prep very well, but despite there being some moments that will challenge you, you're going to have a load of amazing moments. Like, you're going to have a load of amazing moments where you see progress, or you see yourself get to a body composition you've never done before, or you push yourself to do things that you thought you couldn't do. Like, for example, like pushing yourself through a week of fat loss when you were really tired, or, you know, just getting closer to a goal that you never thought you could do before, and, you know, seeing changes in your physique, or pushing yourself to like certain places you never thought you'd be, whatever it is. I could go on and on and on. There's so many amazing things to take away from a prep. It's ultimately the most amazing challenge you'll have ever done, probably at that point, something you'll never have experienced before. And there's so much to be grateful for within that, so much. Even just the simple things on the day-to-day, as I alluded to before, like even eating your meals, like you're still getting probably 5-6 meals a day, something to be grateful for. You're still being able to go and train and do something you love every day, something to be grateful for. You are still being able to, again, work towards a goal, do these things that are pushing you. You're seeing progress, you're seeing change every day. That's something to be grateful for. And you probably have had moments in off season where you get bored of looking the same every day. So there's so many things to like enjoy on a daily basis, even non-related bodybuilding things. And I think even more so, like, find things that aren't bodybuilding related to look forward to. Like, maybe you go to the cinema on a rest day. What a joy. You get a Pepsi Max. Amazing. Like, little things like that, like, and nice things to enjoy and be grateful for. And don't forget that on a daily basis, whether it's bodybuilding related, where it's not, you get to sit down at the end of the day when you box up all these steps, and you get to watch a film, you get to watch your favorite TV show, like whatever it is that kind of allows you to be kind of present and enjoy each day. Like, don't forget that, because otherwise you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I'd have enjoyed that more because it was such an amazing process. So find variables each day that you do get to really enjoy. And especially when you get to a show day, please enjoy it. Please enjoy it. You know, like, bodybuilding is so different to so many other sports, as I've already said, where you spend such a small amount of time on stage. It's very much unlike other sports where maybe you play every week, or even like when you are playing, or even like hobby, like you're performing at the time or whatever it may be. Like, it's all about what you do in that time, what you do in that 90 minutes on the pitch, what you do in that time on stage, you know, how you sing or what you do or whatever it may be. Bodybuilding's, yes, you're posing on stage, but really bodybuilding is kind of like one of those sports where, one of those things where, you know, you do all the work before you get on stage. All you have to do is present. Like, you present your work. You are doing the work day in, day out. That's the work that you show on stage in the moment that you're judged. So realistically, what you're being judged on is what you're doing, you know, every day in the prep. When you're on stage, you're just presenting. Like, you're just presenting the work, and that's something to absolutely love. And that was the thing that I was so grateful that I was actually able to really, really enjoy, was the show day. And I don't know, I mean, I do kind of know why I enjoyed it so much. And I think it's because I spent a lot of time growing up playing sport. Like, I played hockey for a really long time. I also like sang and I performed. So I did a lot of performances, either playing instruments or singing. And for all of those things, I used to get very nervous, because it was very much like in the moment, like, I either nail this or I like ruin it, and that's it. Like, there's nothing outside of my control. I can do all the practice that I want outside. I can make, you know, so many like perfect performances, like in private, in rehearsals. I can do great training sessions outside of a match. None of it matters if I bomb it in the moment. Whereas with bodybuilding, it's very different, because it's kind of the opposite. It's like everything that you actually do outside of it is the stuff that matters. And then when you get on stage, you actually just get to enjoy it. And it was the first time that I've ever had in my life where I've walked on a stage and I've had no nerves. Like, I used to get on stage and I used to shake. I'd be worrying. I'd be anxious. I'd be sweating. And I got on there. I was like, oh my God, I feel so relaxed. And it was because I knew I'd done everything that I needed to do. And that's what you've got to remember when you go into that show day, is like, you've done everything that you need to do up to that point. This is where you get to just enjoy yourself. You get to enjoy yourself, have a good time. This is what you've worked for. And this is just something amazing to kind of treasure. So I've gone off again a little bit at the end there, but just like I said, find the variables that you can enjoy in every day, but especially when it comes to the day itself, have an amazing time. Soak it up, have fun, because it's really something to be treasured. You get it for such a short period, and the more that you can be present in that time frame, the better. So those are my 5 top tips. Probably the longest. That's not going to sound good if I say that. The longest pieces of advice, probably the best way I can say that. The longest piece of advice that I can say that was supposed to be just like short tips. But hopefully, that has been helpful. Like I said, I will probably do like a part 2 at some point, because there's a lot of other things that I can maybe go into when it comes to, like, for example, like finances, when it comes to like posing, when it comes to other like very small variables of like managing training or whatever it may be, or peak weeks and things like that, that I'm more than happy to dive into. And I'd actually love to do that. And if anyone has any requests on those, let me know. Maybe I'll do something on that a little bit further down the line next year, when it gets closer to like the actual season. But if anyone's got any requests, let me know. Always happy to. But yeah, hope this episode has been a helpful one. If anyone's got any questions, as always, please pop me a message, pop me a DM. Always happy to help. And yeah, if you can, like I said at the start, like, subscribe, all that amazing stuff, it would mean the world. And I'll be back with another episode, hopefully next week for you guys.